Doing the most amount of damage is great, but sometimes you just want to have some fun. Whether it is a melee DPS or a range DPS, going into Season 4, what is the most fun DPS spec from our perspective? Because it's all subjective. Fun is definitely subjective. The more you have fun, most likely, the better it is that you're going to be doing on that particular spec, whether it is in dungeons or in raids. So let's see where all of the specs rank today in terms of overall fun in Season 4. First on the list is Frost Decay, which is relatively an okay spec in terms of fun, depending on how you play it, whether you like Obliteration or Syndragosa. Personally, I like Obliteration a little bit more. I like big hits that just fill my screen with big numbers. But I do have to admit that it gets particularly stale with Frost Decay. I'm going to put it into B tier. It's a fun spec to go in every now and again to kind of have a little bit of fun, get broken away or disconnect yourself from the big brain. Oh my god, Outlaw, 10,000 buttons that I need to press and all of that stuff. It's just a fun change of pace, but it does have a lot of drawbacks in terms of its overall stale rotation. Nothing really changed for its playstyle. And you're still a Decay that doesn't have a lot of mobility and has particular issues. Hopefully a rework will fix this in the future. Moving to Unholy, I do have to admit, Unholy is the better version of Frost Decay if you just enjoy or want a good experience on the Death Knight class. It has particularly really cool playstyles depending on where you want to go. In raids, you're going to be playing the Gargoyle single target Bonanza, and in dungeons, you're going to be playing AoE Spam Epidemic Defile Plague Bringer, unless you want to go for a different build. But either way, both of these builds are fun because it has a little bit more variety in terms of its build, and it has some intricate cooldown combinations. I will put it ahead of Frost, particularly also because I just love Decay as a class, period, because it still has its own drawbacks. Once you're past the opener sequence or the setup sequence or whatever it is, you're just kind of doing like a 2 to 3 button rotation gameplay, and that gets a little bit stale also, which in that sense Frost kind of does it a little bit better outside of cooldowns. You react a bit more procs, you kind of change things, you put up Death and Decay out, but with Unholy you kind of just do the same thing, which gets slightly old. Havoc is also a spec that not necessarily a lot of people will agree with where I'm going to be putting it. I'm going to be putting it into B tier as well. Although I do have to mention, for anybody that's molding in the comments right now, Havoc is a much better spec than Frost Decay for sure. Maybe, look, I'll put it in front of Frost Decay. In terms of its design, it's a very good design spec. It has some really niche and really cool talents, and playstyle is kind of the same. The thing is, it's a cookie cutter playstyle, and a lot of the cool talents that I particularly enjoy about Havoc are not the best ones. Now, of course, this is a tier list about fun and not actual performance. However, as a player, I still find it fun to be able to do a lot of damage, and if I'm going to be playing a spec fun or not, I want to play its best build, and then I judge its fun factor. And playing the best build for Havoc, although it's not a bad build, it's decently fun, it doesn't do what I want it to do. Particularly, I enjoy Fell Barrage a lot. I actually like Momentum more than Inertia and a bunch of other stuff. Sometimes I just want to play I want to be a demon forever with Shattered Destiny or whatever the talent is called that just keeps extending your demonic. And none of these talents so far have been really meta. Maybe that changes. Maybe Season 4 will alter that, but considering that we're not yet fully into Season 4, it will still have to wait a little bit until like a final iteration, and even then it might only be bumped up to A tier, nothing particularly major. Balanced Druid has dropped for me. It used to be an S tier spec. It's still very close. I mean, I'm having a little bit more fun, well, actually considerably more fun on Balance than Unholy, but the issues with Balance are still there. The bitterness in my mouth after the talent swap that I kept talking about with Orbital Strike, I think it's called because they always change these names, being a choice note with Arcanic Pulsar takes away a lot of the fun. Like, if those can be broken apart so that you can actually play both, Balanced Druid is an easy issue for me, but because of that and a bunch of issues, you being particularly squishy, especially in Season 4, having to tap target Moonfire so many ads becomes very tedious and is not particularly fun. It gets better in higher and higher keys, but then again, you could probably say the same for a lot of the specs here. With that being said, Balanced Druid is still a fun spec. It's no longer S tier for me. Other specs kind of have taken that spot. And speaking of another spec that actually climbed in the fun factor, I don't know where I had Feral last time, but it was most likely not A tier, or maybe it was. I'm actually enjoying Feral more than Balance this time around, and that's probably because of the tier set to an extent, which is the same tier set that Season 3 has. That is, you know, the Feral Frenzy tier set that just buffs it. It's a simplistic tier set, it's not anything major, but I do get to play some of my favorite talents and playstyles for Feral, which is Rampant Ferocity and Apex Predator. I love doing bites and then just doing damage to everybody. I know Ferocious Bite is not a particularly popular ability among ferals. I don't know why. I mean, that's kind of what a cat should do, but that's fine. And I like the fact that I can also play Convoke. When we talk about fun, sure, it's slightly lower in the terms of performance if we're gonna, you know, do a spectrum of performance, because I mentioned that with Havoc, but Convoke is really fun and it's not that much of a loss. And I think you're still going to want to play Convoke on particular single target fights or particular fights where you want burst damage. So that is a big plus in my opinion. Devastation, surprisingly for a lot of people, is not as bad as sometimes I let it out to be on stream or in other videos. It's actually a decently fun spec, but with a lot of charitability, I'm going to put it into B tier, but at the bottom of the B tier because of two things that I need to discuss. First of all, its overall design in terms of combat is top tier. It's probably at least A tier for me. Flying around, doing a lot of breaths and exploding things all around, that's really, really great. And I've always loved that about Devastation. The problem with it is particularly two, which is two-pronged. One is that the talent diversity is not that big, and I really want to play Firestorm, but after playing it on beta, it seems like they're never going to buff it again. And two, aesthetically, it factors in. I'm not a big fan of how Devastation looks, how Evoker looks in general, and that pulls the class away for fun, because part of the fun in an RPG is to role play your character. Otherwise, what am I doing here, right? I cannot envision myself relating to how Devastation behaves in the lore, behaves in the story, looks with its armor on, what armor, lol, and how it actually looks as an actual race, the Drakthir, I mean. So let's say if we would have had Devastation on Orcs, which sounds really ridiculous, I would have probably liked Devastation a little bit more. BM Hunter is similar to Frost Decay for me. It's a simple spec. It's I need a break from all of this. Oh, I'm just tired, and I'll put it into B tier. For the same reasons as Frost Decay, it's going to be around B tier because it gets stale, to be honest with you. It does get stale. It seems like it's been doing better in the last couple of patches, especially with 10.2 and the Call of the Wild changes. That's been particularly great. However, similar to Balance, there's also a bitterness taste for me with BM Hunter because it's also a visual spec. Actually, BM Hunter does not have that many visually impactful abilities that, you know, Balance Druid has or other specs have as well. It did have one though, and that is Stampede, and they got close to getting Stampede back visually for Beast Mastery with the initial design of Call of the Wild that was prior to 10.2 being released. In the PTR, when you used Call of the Wild, and every time a beast spawned, it spawned at your location and it charged the enemy. It's a minor thing, but it does add to the fantasy and the RPG-ness of it when you just throw beasts constantly at the target. It's actually completely boring, useless, and forgettable when they just spawn at the target in the middle of the fight with a lot of other people being there, a lot of mechanics happening there, the boss just swiping tails and breaths all around, so you don't really get to actually see the beast that you constantly spawn. I know from a technical standpoint it's more efficient for the beast to not have to factor in its travel time from your location to the target, and it probably alleviates a lot of the terrain, traversal issues that pet would have by going from point A to point B where it could get stuck. So it spawning at the target is better in that sense, but it still takes away the fantasy aspect for me, and that's something that I've played with. I found it fun, and then they took it away, and as with everything, especially when I'm concerned, when they take away something that I find cool because it's not that great, then the spec kind of feels a little bit bittersweet, and that's more bitter than sweet with BM Hunter. Marksmanship is around B tier. You're going to see a lot of B tier spec. Maybe put it a little bit in front of Devastation. It's fun. I particularly really like to do a lot of single target with Marksmanship, which doesn't feel like it's going to happen in Season 4 either, unless I'm missing something. I'm not sure the bow will change that, and it has to happen with Marksmanship because you are the sniper. Your biggest ability is aim shot. It's supposed to crank single target. And it used to do that, I believe. In Shadowlands, there was a time when I think Serpent Stalker Trickery came in as a legendary, and now it's a talent, but it's a little bit boring, where just aim shots just cranked. You just cranked on boss damage. Don't get me wrong, volley, rapid fire, trick shots, and doing explosive AoE with an explosive shot is really fun, and that has to be a part of the spec. But the fact that I don't feel like I'm just throwing my well-timed arrow in between the eyes of my target, completely annihilating it, it takes away a bit of the fantasy for me, and that's why it's B tier. Everything else it does is just really, really fun. Survival Hunter is the encompassing, the epitome, the apex of bitterness for me, since it's one of my all-time favorite specs. Easily S tier fun for me, if it would only be designed properly. But it might be fun. A lot of people seem to enjoy survival, so I'm not gonna nag on it too much. I'm not a fan of its design, and I haven't been a fan of its design throughout the entirety of Shadowlands. It has the potential to be one of the entirety of Dragonfly, not Shadowlands, Jesus. It has the potential to be one of the most fun and engaging melee specs, most unique melee specs with middle range combat, where pretty much all of your abilities, with the exception of 1 or 2, are ranged abilities, which is really cool, something that no other class does. Red kind of tries, Unholy kind of tries. But they're just taking that away with very, 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 very boring talents. That just really kills a spec for me, especially when they've added a really new cool talent, which is Spearhead, that I think since Season 1 it hasn't seen play, and I believe Survival is getting the Season 1 series, which I don't think changes much, or it might still get the Fury of the Eagle? No, I think it's Season 1. We might see Spearhead being played once again. However, Spearhead is a cooldown that you don't want to match with Coordinated Assault. And that is fine, but that doesn't feel like WoW design to me, because WoW, the way it works is you just want to crank as much and exponentially increase your damage as much as possible by stacking cooldowns, because everybody does it. But if you're going to have to play Spearhead and Coordinated Assault and then just rotate DPS cooldowns, sure, that's a unique thing, but it doesn't translate into a lot of rewards that you would get for actually performing really well. And considering that you have 5, 6, 7 nodes, I don't know how many there are still now, that just give you flat, oh, this does 10% more damage, that does 5% more damage, this does 10% more damage. That is just very boring. And when I play a spec and I grab it, it's like, oh, I wonder what build I'm gonna play, having to waste about half of my points just to know I just have to increase the damage at this. It's just boring when a lot of other classes do this a lot better. Arcane Mage is also another B tier spec. I love the fantasy of Arcane. I like how it plays. It's very intricate, it's very punishing, but it also is very, very rewarding. And even with all that said, it doesn't climb any higher than B tier. I don't know, I'm probably gonna put it a little bit behind Devastation because of its level of punishment that it can suffer for its rotation. And to be fair, even if it is really cool and I like the concept of it, it gets stale and repetitive since you're a one-trick pony. You just do the one thing. Pump your Touch the Magi as much as possible with all of your cooldowns, and then that's it. To be fair, it is kind of fun to just do Arcane Explosion, Barrage, Arcane Explosion, Barrage, Arcane Orb. Oh, actually, the most fun thing that Arcane does is shooting back-to-back Arcane Orbs, which is Arcane Orb, Arcane Barrage, Arcane Orb, Arcane Barrage. That gameplay loop is just very, very satisfying, but it does get old after a while, so I couldn't see myself maining it. I have come around with Fire Mage. Originally, Fire Mage was around C tier-ish spec for me. I actually been loving it, been playing it on stream. I love Fire Mage in general. It has a really rewarding playstyle. I like how accessible combustion is, and if you're gonna make a spec that just explodes in its DPS cooldown, have that DPS cooldown be reliable, whether it is through its Sunking proc that you're gonna be doing. And let me tell you, I don't know how Fire Mages play without ice flows in top keys, because I know some of them do. I cannot play Fire Mage without ice flows, but we are talking about fun here, and that's not a big loss, if anything. So playing Ice Flow so that I can just cast my Sunking while moving, because the Pyroblast hard cast just takes so long, is very, very, very satisfying. The fact that I can play both Ignite and Flame Strike, or at least you do now, maybe that will change deeper into Season 4, is very fun for me also. And I get faster combust, I get shifting power, which also gives me combust. I am super tanky, which is a big plus for me. Makes me really love Fire Mage, and similarly Frost Mage as well. I've always liked Frost Mage probably the most out of all the mage specs, let's put it here. That seems only fair, since you are getting giga glacial spikes. Now I know all of our numbers are going to scale way higher on in season 4. I was gonna say on the PTR, but I did test a bunch of the specs, and Mage was one of them on the PTR a little bit with some of the best gear that you could get. Maybe I didn't get the right amount of trinkets. However, Glacial Spike is legit the one ability that I've seen do the most amount of damage in a single hit. Maybe it competes strongly with Enhancement Shaman's Elemental Blast, but the biggest numbers that I've seen on my screen are Glacial Spike. And in a world where you have a gazillion, tiny little damage procs all over your screen, seeing a big fat number is very satisfying, and that's kind of what I want to see from my main, which is not Frost Mage, but Frost Mage actually delivers, and Glacial Spike is very satisfying to use. Windwalker Monk has dropped in terms of popularity for me. I'm gonna put it into C tier. It's okay. Every time I try to play Windwalker, it just doesn't bring anything awesome to me. It doesn't attract me in any way. It doesn't have any like, oh, get this, you're gonna be able to do this kind of stuff. I feel like Mistweaver is just a much more fun monk melee spec to play than Windwalker, even if I never have to heal with Mistweaver ever. And I know Windwalker has a lot of issues with his design. I think Feline Stomp has a large array of problems that it needs to have fixed, especially in certain raid fights, especially in certain pools, and it interacts with the terrain weirdly. And I don't want that to be the thing that I worry about when I just want to have fun and play a monk spec. Whew, Red Paladin, baby. Holy shit. It used to be S tier. It's not necessarily worse now, but I have come to love a lot of other specs a little bit more. Red Paladin is very fun, but for the same reason that other specs are B tier, Red Paladin is A tier, and that is that it becomes a little bit repetitive. In terms of its simplistic and rewarding and exciting rotations, I don't think any other spec does it better than Red Paladin. However, the fact that it just is kind of like a cookie cutter and becomes particularly stale takes a little bit away, and that is not enough for it to be S tier, but it is good. I could probably maybe even put it top A tier. Maybe not in front of Feral, but definitely in front of Balance, which is something that I never thought I would see happen. Just proves how fun Red is as a spec. Obviously, it's a pretty strong spec. It has a really good kit. In terms of its rework, it's particularly good. It's very tanky. I love being tanky, and I like having a lot of options in supporting my party with a lot of utility, blessings, sacrifices, and all of that. That is really good. It's not just about the damage and the rotation that it's doing. Shadow Priest is tricky. I will put Shadow Priest into B tier because I am one of the probably few people that is not a fan of the Shadow Priest rework. I loved Mind Seer. I felt it was very satisfying. I'm not a big fan of my entire AoE is just putting dots on everybody and doing damage to this one target, and then everybody else takes damage from it. I particularly loved Shadow Priest when I had both access to Psychic Link and Mind Seer in Season 1, which was my favorite time playing Shadow Priest in all the last couple of expansions, but they took that away. That's fine. Maybe the spec functions better now, which that's probably all the better for the Shadow Priest lovers out there. More power to you. It's not for me. I don't find it particularly interesting. And to be fair, a lot of the complaints that I was not really feeling before playing a lot more Shadow Priest that people had with Shadow Crash kind of crept up on me as well. So I kind of agree with the community in the sense that Shadow Crash just doesn't cut it. It has too many issues, and when you want Shadow Crash to be really good, it's not, in terms of like, oh, big pulls. And probably the biggest issue with me and Shadow Priest, why it's B tier, because I'm kind of like saying all of these negative things back to back, and despite that, it's still B tier because it is a fun spec, and I like the concept of old gods and madness and all of that. But the mental decay, was it? Whatever it was, when you were extending your dots, that went away, and that can only be used in single target. I think it's something with Mind Flay now. Using Mind Flay or Mind Flay Insanity on a target extends the dots on that one target. I don't remember exactly how it used to work in Season 1, but I know when you used it, you would extend the dots. I think it was Mind Seer. You would extend the dots on all targets hit by Mind Seer, and you would extend the dots in AoE constantly. I have to admit, as a lover of Balanced Druid, Affliction Warlock, and Shadow Priest, I like dots. I don't want to constantly tap target to refresh dots. That is not fun in 2024. That is a problem with all the dot specs, and considering that Shadow Crash is supposed to, or you just use Shadow Crash to refresh the dots, there is a short period of time where your dots fall off. And you don't want that because a lot of your damage is factoring in you maintaining your dots. And I'm kind of saying this about Shadow Priest, but you can apply this to Balanced Druid and Affliction as well. Similarly to Assassination, although Assassination is a little bit higher. I love the concept of Assassination, and the rework is really great, and it's been my main in the Mirror together with Sub, and I love it. However, it does fall short in AoE and Mythic Plus consistently because of how it's actually tuned. I think it's doing way better in Mythic Plus than ever before, but it is very strictly tied to mostly stealth. And re-stealths are more important on Assassination than any other spec, ironically, or maybe not ironically, because that is essentially how you activate Indiscriminate Carnage, which normally that sounds great because then Indiscriminate Carnage is just get into stealth, and that's, you know, an ability with no real cooldown, but you just have to finish your current combat. But there are so many things, at least in Mythic Plus, that just stop you from getting out of combat. We can count the bugs as well that, you know, keep you in combat for way longer than you have to, but we also talk about certain affixes like Spiteful or Bursting, that even after you finish combat, you still have to wait a little bit for the damage to come off so you can go in stealth, or to drop combat so you can go in stealth. And if you're going to be doing decent amount of keys, you just have to tell everybody, stop playing, let me get into stealth. Sure, that's probably how you should play with an Assassination if you don't want them to hate their lives, but as an Assassination rogue, dude, I just don't want to be that guy that just tells everybody, dude, let me just get stealth, because you would think it's not that big of a deal. It's not if you're an outlaw or a sub, which we're getting into as well. But the difference between getting and not getting consistent stealth with Assassination matters a lot, and it just feels very bad to go into a new pack in dungeons and not have, obviously that's not an issue in the raid, but it feels very bad to have to do that in Mythic Plus, and that keeps it away from being any higher in the rankings. Outlaw though is top A tier for me. Not currently S tier, but it is top A tier. It is incredible how fun this spec is, dude. And you're particularly really tanky. There's one weird thing that I don't like about Outlaw, which is not making it into S tier, probably one of the reasons, which is going to be very weird if you really hear what it is. But it is the fact that it's too strong. It is too strong, and mostly related to Restless Blades, because I am maining Rogue at the moment, which is going to change in Season 4, and I've played all of the specs, and playing through Assassination and Subtlety and then going to Outlaw and realizing, dude, you're just a much better version of all of these specs, just feels like I'm cheating, and it feels like it's something that shouldn't exist, because I don't think it will last for very long unless Outlaw just gets nerfed in a way in its tankiness and its utility. You have close to 100% uptime on sprint in raid fights. You have close to 100% uptime on feint if you really needed it. You get fast vanishes, fast evasions, fast cloaks. Like, cloak is crazy how often you have it, and you don't have that for other rogues, and it just feels like it just feels weird. It just feels like, dude, this is way too much. This is way too good. And it's not about the damage. It's just about the utility kit, which is, I mean, it's fun, but it just feels like, listen, here, you play this overpowered, overly designed spec that's way better than everybody else's, and yeah, just have fun. That's okay. Subtlety Rogue is also a spec that I particularly enjoy a lot currently. At the moment, I'll put it in front of Assassination, which functionally I like Assassination more, or thematically I like Assassination more, but Subtlety just plays better, especially in raid right now. As I'm recording this, we're still progressing through Smolderon. By the time you're watching this, it's probably going to be dead, because we're recording this a little bit ahead of time. Dude, I know Smolderon is Subtlety's fight, but the control over your cooldowns, how you match them, how you get fast, how you can get them faster with Shadow Dust. I think if Shadow Dust would go away from Subtlety, Subtlety will drop a tier for me. That's how fun that talent is. I do have to say that it could be S tier or close to S tier if I had a little bit more talent variety. There is some talent variety, sure. but I want to play Gormaw's Bite. I've been wanting to play Gormaw's Bite since the 10.2 PTR when I tested the rework for Rogue. I thought that was really cool. It felt like a fun ability, but it was never tuned enough, and it was also nerfed because it was cranking too hard on PTR. I mentioned this in a bunch of other prediction tier lists when we talk about, oh my god, this spec is doing so much better on the beta. It's going to be S tier, but it's going to get nerfed. That was sub, and that was Gormaw's Bite back in 10.2 PTR. And I'm kind of sad because it was a new thing that I could play with. It felt really cool. Obviously, doing damage helps as well. Elemental Shaman. I do have to say, I kind of want to put it into B tier, but I'm going to put it top C tier. I know a lot of people like the meatball spamminess. I'm not a fan of it. That's not what made me fall in love with Elemental. Actually, Season 2 Elemental with the Lightning Rod, that was so difficult to play, but it was so rewarding. Lightning Rod spreading, that was incredible. Elemental for me is juggling a gazillion plates and having fun with them. And if I'm going to be ranking this for 10-7 and, you know, Season 4 and all of that, unfortunately, meatball spammy all day, every day, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day is not for me. It's fun for a dungeon a couple of weeks, but not something consistent. So that's where Elemental is going to land up for me. Enhancement is a different beast, however, and I will be putting Enhancement all the way to the top of the B tier. Close to A tier. There's something about it because Enhancement has been a main that I've tackled with for a lot of my years at WoW. There's something about it that just doesn't click for me for it to be higher than B tier, although I love the concept of Enhancement. Elemental Blast is fun, Lightning Blast channeling is fun, but I feel like some of the concepts that I particularly love about Enhancement fun was always surrounding Storm Strike. Obviously, I'm also in the old school boomer group of 200 Enhancement, which I think it's broken. I think the flow of combat with dual wield is way better. But I miss feeling like it feels like Enhancement is a lot elemental, which isn't necessarily a problem. I think this should be a part of its spec identity, but I want to be able to have the option to change. I want to have the option to go into the Storm build, which was in 10.1, I believe 10.1, 10.15, 10.17. I don't think that's going to be a case in Season 4 because we're still retaining the current tier set going into Season 4, which heavily influences what build you play. You're still going to be playing the same build, and you're still particularly squishy. One thing that I would like for Elemental to have to be a little bit more fun is interact with Elemental a bit more, or use more crackling down the hammer and destroying the earth around me type feeling that, you know, kind of Sundering has, which was also, funny enough, a Season 2 thing, not as much as Season 3 and Season 4 thing. So that's probably why I don't really see Enhancement a little bit higher. One thing that has been surprisingly fun for me has been Warlock, which is such a controversial thing. I would very closely put Affliction into S tier. I love Affliction, but it's missing that. And the one thing that I don't like about Affliction is how much I have to give up in terms of my talents to do either good single target or good AoE. I was never a fan of having to give up a big chunk of my damage, because damage matters as well, for fun, just to be able to do one thing. Other than that, Affliction is so good, especially in AoE, seed spamming, so satisfying, and Dark Glare needs to be buffed before Affliction can be S tier as well for me. Similarly, as much as I dislike the version of Demonology, the tier set just carries this spec in terms of fun for me. Doom brand has to make it into the talents. Like I'm saying this, devs, if you watch some of our videos, I know you watch some of them and maybe you like or don't like them, Doom brand has to be part of the demo class tree, my dude. Maybe even taking the place of actual Doom, because that's just like, you know, a dead ability. Nobody uses it. It's a dead concept. But tab targeting, spreading out Dooms, and then just blowing them up and spawning a Doom guard, that is so satisfying. I love that concept. I'm still bummed out that Tyrant is very weak, criminally weak. That needs to change. And also Nether Portal being nerfed to it's no longer being valid anymore, or valuable, or competitive at any point. That is a big minus. Like if those would fix, I would probably be maining Demonology this patch. I'm not gonna lie, it is that fun. Funny enough, Destruction does not do it. I know people are going crazy about how strong Destruction is right now, but that's not enough for me. The cool parts about Destruction, and that's probably never going to change until they rework the talents, are actually the two sides of Infernal. I love Infernal, and some of the best time I've played with Destruction was probably in Shadowlands, where you could have, or BFA, where you could have all of the Infernal buffs to, you know, increase your Chaos Bolts or Rain of Fire damage, get that Blasphemy in quicker. Having both of them at the same time, which is a similar situation with Balanced Druid, was what made Destruction really, really fun for me. So I'm going to be putting it top B tier. Let's put it top B tier. It doesn't compete with other specs as well, and it is a little bit boring. Like the majority of the talent tree is slightly boring. Channel Demon Fire is turbo boring. Soulfire is kind of interesting, but the coolest parts about Destruction are its capstones, and they're so restrictive to get that I feel like, oh, you want to have this much fun, but because we need to keep Destruction balanced, you're gonna have this much fun. And that's why Destruction is around B tier for me. I don't know if a lot of people gravitate towards this mindset, or if you feel me on this, but that's how I see it. It's getting there. We are getting there, boys. Arms Warrior finally is getting some cool stuff. I loved the Cleave ability of... This is very biased, by the way. I love Cleave. Cleave is a cool arms ability, and they've reworked it a bunch of times over the years, and I've loved every subsequent rework. It's getting, again, better, because especially we're having the tier set as well. And with the new tier set, we're going to be playing some really cool playstyles with Giga Blaze Storms, Bone Grinders, Killer Executes. Although, to be fair, there is kind of like a small issue with arms, that its single target still feels a little bit weak, and once again, damage is, here and there, but for a spec that has Mortal Strike, hit a target very hard, Execute, hit a target very hard, a target, then that target has to take a lot of damage. And it feels like in Season 3, that's more of a thing than Season 4. So that's still not enough to take it away from me, but that is where I see it right now. Arms is just really good. I feel like it's probably my favorite DPS spec to play at the moment, and maybe there's one or two more contenders coming into S tier. Maybe in the future we might revisit this ranking once I'm deeper into Season 4, once I have more playthrough with all the specs, but that's where it is. Fury is always going to be a favorite of mine. I kind of like the Season 4 Fury a little bit more. Probably put it around Feral. I don't know where... I don't think it might do more than Outlaw for me. I think it's a way better. It gets boring. It gets boring now, but in Season 4 it's a little bit better. I will essentially miss Odin's Fury because it is a fun ability. However, I love Onslaught. It's a really fun ability to use. I love Bloodthirst being really impactful, although I will also miss Bloodbath. But it feels like with Fury we cannot have all of the cool stuff. Like if Fury could be in a situation where you could play maybe both Odin's Fury and have Bloodbath or big critical strikes, or let's say Odin's Fury and maybe have Raging Blows, I feel like that would just make the spec way better, way more fun. Obviously, it's the why not just have all of your toys at the same time, and that makes it better. True, that is a little bit weird to say because, more is better always, but Fury just doesn't have a lot. So it's not like you're taking a spec that does a lot of things, like let's say Unholy, and then you just give it all of the stuff. No, Fury doesn't have that many stuff to play with, and it feels like I always have to choose between one or two good things or another set of one or two good things instead of having like 3 cool things. You know what I mean? That's kind of how I feel with Fury, and that's probably what's keeping it from being higher into A tier, maybe even S tier. One surprise that I have had, and this is the most internal conflict that I have had on the PTR, because this is going to be A tier. You might have expected it's not even S tier. Augmentation for me has been down in the dumpsters in terms of fun, but I have been playing it a little bit recently, and I just cannot go over how fun it is. If it wasn't for it being a drag tier, and I'm not just not big of a fan on drag tier and how the lore of drag tier is, I would love Augmentation more. And another thing that would keep it from S tier is the fact that black dragons should not be buffers for me as far. They should be tanks, they should be destroyers, not buffers. I'm not a fan of that concept, but if we take that away and just look at the pure rotation of Augmentation, it feels like you can impact the battle in such a unique way that you can change the outcome of a combat. And I kind of like being able to play a spec that does that. the wrapping, the packaging is not ideal, but that's where I see Augmentation. But Augmentation, don't take my word for it, it's still a pretty good, strong spec, and is most likely going to do amazing things in Season 4, alongside a lot of other specs that are on the tier list. But once again, this is fun, this is not about actual performance. Since as far as performance is concerned, we already have a video on our predictions for the melee meta in Season 4, and you can check it out and see that we are 100% right 100% of the time, all time, every day, all day.